beautiful unless allergies are slowing you down. If you're dealing with sneezing, congestion, itchy eyes, or sinus pressure, our experienced providers at Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton are here to help. We offer fast, personalized treatment to get you breathing easier and feeling better. Don't let allergies take over your spring. Call or visit us today. Warner Hospital and Health Services, quality care right here, right now.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest on the Zoom today is Dr. Emily Weidner, Superintendent of Cerro Gordo Schools. Dr. Weidner, how you doing this morning?
Good morning, Seth. It's a beautiful day in Cerro Gordo. I'm doing wonderful.
Yeah, I love to see that sunshine out on a March day and hope for those warm temperatures right around the corner for sure. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Weidner, I'm going to kind of piggyback on a conversation I had yesterday with one of your peers here in the area. I had Mrs. Cheryl Warner on at Warrensburg Latham Schools yesterday, and she talked about a book study that they were doing, The Anxious Generation. And this is a publication, or a book, I guess I should say, that has really kind of opened some eyes to the struggles of youth and how to deal with those and what kids are dealing with and all those things. Tell us about your endeavor into this book. What did you do there in Cerro Gordo?
Sure. Cheryl Warner and I probably did the same book study on this in the fall with the Illinois Association of School Administrators. And that's a group of superintendents who read this book. It's a 2024 book by Jonathan Haidt. And really it explores the impact that access to the internet, smartphones, and social media has had on a generation of kids. And for us in Cerro Gordo, after I read it, I started to talk to my colleagues about it. And it was actually teachers who asked if we could do the same book study here. Mm-hmm. So we've been reading the book this spring and then meeting about once a month. And we're going to wrap that up actually this week. So as we've studied this book, it's been kind of validating some of the trends that we're seeing in students and in our own kids and even in ourselves. We've been able to kind of discuss that and see the impact of access to phones and social media and how it's changing things for educators.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So tell me a little bit about this book and maybe where, I know you've got teenagers at home, so I don't know how much of this you already knew. Was there new information in this book? Mrs. Warner put it a really good way yesterday. She said a lot of this we probably already knew, but to have it presented to us in a different way, can maybe open some eyes. So how about that?
Absolutely. Yes. Kind of the gist of the book is just the changing childhood that American kids are having. So the book talks about, in the 80s, there's a lot of independent play. There's a lot of freedom and independence for kids. And somehow that gradually shifted. And the author cites child abductions and some of the TV shows that kind of made parents nervous and felt like they needed to be more overprotective. And one of the lines from the book that resonated with me the most was that parents are now overprotective in the real world and underprotective in the digital world. Mm-hmm. So, we give our kids smartphones when they're toddlers and give them unfettered access to the internet. And they have the ability to see all kinds of things that maybe they're not ready for. Mm-hmm. It also affects their attention span. And the author talks about social media and its impact on our students, especially girls, comparing themselves to people that they see online, getting some unrealistic expectations. With boys, it talks more about video games and kind of addiction to those kinds of things. So I definitely saw it as an educator who's, been in this business for 26 years now, but I also looked at it as a parent and thinking about some of the decisions I made. And I probably would have gone back in time and changed a few things if I could, but when you know better, you do better.
I'm curious, can you expand on that?
Sure. I just think that you don't always know as technology develops. When my kids were little, YouTube was new and things like that. So we're kind of learning and looking back in retrospect. And what's interesting about this book study for us is that we have teachers who are in their first year, and then we have teachers who are near retirement, and they have kids of all ages as well. So kind of listening to all those different groups talk about it, and just seeing what they see with kids. I think universally we see changes in attention span
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just kids' ability to sit and focus longer.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there's a change in playing outside that I think, was mentioned in the book, that we also kind of see that if given the choice, a lot of kids would pick playing on a computer or a tablet or a video game console rather than going outside.
Mm-hmm.
But also we talked about our own, social media habits and things like that, and how that can get in the way of productivity, of parenting, and there's a lot of levels that we kind of explored with our discussions.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. I was just curious about that. What you
Sure.
kind of had learned is, your kids are now older, and what you had picked up on. But again, that's Dr. Emily Weidner, superintendent of Cerro Gordo schools. Her and her staff doing a study on the anxious generation, a book that is kind of being studied at the education level now. So, Dr. Weidner, what did you take away from that book, and how are you implementing, or maybe not implementing, but what are you doing about what you learned in that book in Cerro Gordo schools?
Yeah. So I think that for us, it kind of depends on the level, but one of the things that the author talks about towards the end is that it's not just something that can be fixed at the school level or the parent level. It really ideally would be something that we could address with the school, the parents, and even the government. And he talks about the government, putting restrictions on when kids can have access to social media accounts,
Mm-hmm.
and having some, guidelines for the tech companies that they actually have to follow. For parents, really pushing that free play time, getting kids out, getting kids independence
Mm-hmm.
and practice at things in the real world without other parents or society judging them, for letting their kids have independence and maybe walk to the store or walk to school or things of that nature. And then for the school, kind of restricting access and providing more free play. And so a little bit less time on computers, putting the cell phones away totally at school, and then with the free play, also letting kids problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're playing on the playground, there's kind of this inherent need to interfere and to police and to
Step in, yeah,
referee.
uh-huh. Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
And it's really, obviously teachers have to be there to protect and supervise and things like that. But part of that play is really learning how to problem solve and how to get along and how to solve conflicts. So
Mm-hmm.
play is much more than just playing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I wonder if that too is a lost art, right? Like it felt like back when I was a kid, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well, that like teachers just kind of knew when to step in and intervene, and or not make a big deal about something or not make a big deal about something, and just have a conversation. That kind of judgment feels like it's a lost art right now.
Yeah, it's a very tricky time because you want to make sure that students are safe.
Uh-huh.
You want to protect students from bullying and things of that nature. But they really need that time to work on those social skills and work on the problem solving skills and to sort some of those things out. So I think the big thing is to just protect that time for free play and make sure students have that. And then, at our younger grades, to kind of monitor how much time they're getting on devices. And then at our older grades, we do have cell phones that are put away during class time, but just kind of making sure that we're keeping track of kids learning to interact, learning to have social skills, shaking hands to introduce themselves,
Mhm.
and not just kind of being buried in their phones and social media.
Yeah. How much exposure do kids have to, I know like with learning, I mean, obviously learning is going digital, right? So you're going to have
Mhm.
iPads or Chromebooks or whatever the device is. You're going to have those in the classroom. What's the status of some of those things in Cerro Gordo schools?
Sure. So it hasn't been that long in education since the big trend was to try to be a school that has one-to-one computing.
Mhm.
That was a big push. And we do have Chromebooks at our Junior high, high school, all of our students are issued a Chromebook and they get to take those home. And then our elementary students have access to Chromebooks. They don't take them home, but each classroom has a cart. So we do have students that spend time on the Chromebooks and on Google Classroom and things like that. So we want to make sure that we have a balance where they're getting those skills that they need to use technology, because they are going to use that in probably most of the jobs and careers that they have, but also making sure that we're pushing social skills and interpersonal skills and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, definitely. Back to how you implement things in Cerro Gordo. What are some of the challenges maybe you saw or that were presented in this book that you see at maybe day to day, maybe just every now and then? What was in the anxious generation that you can relate to in Cerro Gordo right now?
Sure. I think probably the social media, when I'm thinking of our older kids, it can present a lot of problems in school. Some of the things that students can post can come into the school and have, even if it's posted outside of the school day, it can have impact socially during the school day. So many schools have to kind of deal with those issues of what kids are posting or saying on social media. And that's part of our job too, is to really educate them
Mhm.
on online safety, online etiquette, and things of that nature.
Mhm.
But even if you've got the phones put away during the day, that social media piece can still impact a school.
Yeah, and that's what I hear so
Performance.
often is like, the kids aren't on the phones at school or they're not on the devices at school, but what happens when they're on devices not at school spills into the school day. Do you get much in the way of interruptions and disruptions to the school day because of those things?
I'd say that we do some mediation and helping kids navigate those types of things. Um, that's definitely part of, working with tweens and teens is you're going to have to help with some of those social situations. And social media has just kind of changed that a little bit for us.
Mhm.
It's certainly a bigger issue over the last few years than it was earlier in my career.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, had a question for you and totally forgot. But at any rate, when it comes to just this book study, what were some of the things your staff was coming back with or talking about with you as they read this?
I think for a lot of our discussion, we've had two meetings on it so far, and we're wrapping up this last one this week. There was some nostalgia over kind of the 80s childhood and some of the freedoms that we had then, and discussions of going into the woods and building forts, and
Mhm.
our parents not knowing where we were for hours, and some of the fun memories of that. And then thinking about, our toddlers who we handed an iPad when they were 2, 3 years old, and we're so proud that they had access to that and how cool that was. And then kind of reflecting now and thinking maybe we should have put them outside more and, kind of had that similar 80s childhood.
Yeah.
But really, I think there's a balance to be had in there of freedom and an opportunity to problem solve and play, but also to understand technology because it's rapidly evolving and they're going to need to know and understand it and know the pitfalls and the strengths of it as well.
Yeah, and I feel like this conversation could also tie back into, the COVID isolation we experienced back in 2000 or in 2020, 2021-ish time frame. And then obviously extra exposure to devices. Do you feel like you're still seeing the impacts of that as, now probably your high schoolers were in late grade school, junior high time? I don't know. Do you feel like you're still dealing with some of that in Cerro Gordo and the social side of things, the emotional side of things? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Probably. Yeah, I think that we probably are. We definitely discuss it less with every year that goes on.
Sure.
As soon
Yeah.
as we kind of came out of that COVID era, we really could tell a difference. But I think the further we get away from it, the less we attribute it to that. But it's probably got a lingering effect, whether we recognize that or not.
Fair enough. Well, on that note, Dr. Weidner, let's break, come back with some more. Dr. Emily Weidner, Superintendent of Cerro Gordo Schools, my guest on the Zoom. More to come with Dr. Weidner on the WHOW Morning Show.
WHOW.
Rita Frazier in with an RFD commodity market update on this Tuesday morning. This hour, we're trading higher in the corn, mostly lower in the soybeans and lower in the wheat. May corn up 3 3/4, 463 1/4, and December corn up 2 1/4 at 488 3/4. May soybeans down 5 1/4, 1158 1/4. July down a nickel, 1174. November beans up 1 3/4, 1148. May wheat Chicago down 1 1/2 at 586 1/4. July down 1 1/4, and September down a penny at 612 3/4. Livestock, April live cattle down 40, 234.90. April feeder cattle up 95 at 353.42. April lean hogs down a nickel, 90.75.
When it comes to finding primary care, you can be seen at any doctor's office, but at Memorial Care, you're not just seen, you're heard. Our primary care team takes the time to listen to you, building a lasting relationship based on transparency and trust. So when you notice a change in your health, you've got a team that's ready to advocate for what you need. Memorial Care, real connections. Learn more at memorial.health/primary care.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest on the Zoom today, Dr. Emily Weidner, Superintendent of Cerro Gordo Schools. Well, Dr. Weidner, it is the time of year, and I know my kids get back from spring break next week, and I think they dive right into that state testing. What's going on there for Cerro Gordo Schools?
Yes, we've still got a week before spring break, so we're hanging on here. But we have been doing our IAR testing, our Illinois Assessment of Readiness, at the elementary school, and then we start our Illinois Science Assessment at the junior high school today. And then on April 8th, we will have the pre-ACT and the ACT for our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. So this is obviously something that our teachers spend a lot of time preparing for. It's how we're kind of evaluated as a school, and obviously for the ACT, that has can have an impact on students getting into their preferred colleges and universities. So kind of a high stakes time for schools, and something that we take very seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned that kind of evaluation piece. I know that those designations that you strive for on a yearly basis are changing next year. What's that going to look like, and how does that change at all how you administer tests to kids right now?
So yeah, the state is looking to change those summative designations, both what they're labeled as and how they're scored. So they have been doing a listening tour over the last several months, and just wrapped those up, where they talked about changes that they'd like to make, and they gave educators across the state a chance to give some feedback, and then they made adjustments based on that feedback, which is awesome. So Cerro Gordo, we have typically been right in that exemplary, commendable, right on that line. So exemplary is the top 10% of schools. And then commendable was basically the next, 80%. It was most of the schools in the state were in that commendable range. So for us, that commendable is a score that we were happy with. And, we're always trying to kind of reach for that exemplary, but it didn't differentiate very well that we were kind of at the top of that list. And schools that were performing much less favorably were in that same grouping. So they are proposing to change the summative designations to exemplary, and then approaching exemplary, and then commendable, developing, and comprehensive. So basically 20% of schools under this new framework would be exemplary. And then the next 20% would be approaching, and then 60% would be in those last few categories.
Sure.
So for us, that tells our story a little bit better. It shows that we are in that top range. And they also changed this year, they changed some of the cut scores so that we are more in line with other states. Essentially what it looked like for Illinois is that we had a tougher grading scale on our state assessments than other states. So our students weren't looking as college and career ready as our neighboring states. And it was really because grading scale on our state tests were higher. So ISB has done some work to correct that as well.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. That's
Mhm.
really interesting. And I know a lot has been made over the years of, such an emphasis on just testing, a select few days of testing versus, an entire year of instruction. You mentioned kind of the shift in that focus this year. Do you feel like it's trending in the right direction from that perspective?
I do. I think our state superintendent, Tony Sanders, was a school superintendent. So I think he's really got his finger on the pulse of, what's going on in schools. And I think he's trying to make some positive changes in that direction. So they've also made some changes in what makes up those summative designations based on what they've been seeing in schools in Illinois. Um, and so now we'll have proficiency and growth in English language, arts, and math at the elementary level. Those will be kind of our core indicators, which really hasn't changed. But at the high school, it will change. It will be proficiency and growth, as well as graduation rate will be the core indicators. So previously, graduation rate and ninth grade on track had both been indicators. And really, that data kind of shows the same thing. If your ninth graders who are passing their classes and are on track to graduate, if that number is good, your graduation rate is probably also going to be good.
Sure.
So it was redundantly helpful for districts who were doing well in those areas and redundantly harmful for those who weren't. So they've eliminated that ninth grade on track as part of it. And then some of the other factors they took out and as indicators unless they're positive, unless they can help a school district. So those are English language learner progress, consistent attendance, and then participation in a school climate survey. So for a small school like Cerro Gordo, we're not going to have much in the way of English language learners. You have to have at least 20 students to make a group. So we won't get a rating in that area. Participation in a climate survey is pretty easy. It doesn't matter what people say in the climate survey. It's about student participation. If you get 100%, that boosts your score for your designation. And then consistent attendance is a change. They called it chronic absenteeism before.
Right.
So just kind of flipping that the other way and making it a positive thing
I see.
can help you as well.
Very-
So I think those are good changes.
Sure. Very quickly, about 10 seconds. Do you feel like there's going to be a drastic shift in overall scores on the school report card next year?
I don't think it'll be a huge shift. I think the designations will be a big shift in terms of, you'll have 20% exemplary schools. So that will be a positive thing for a lot of districts and potentially for Cerro Gordo, given how close we've been for many years.
Gotcha.
I think that's a great thing.
Sure. Very good. Well, Dr. Weidner, I hate to do this to you. I got to let you go. Dr. Emily Weidner, Superintendent of Cerro Gordo Schools.
WHOW.